Welcome, AP Economics students. This is Ms. Foley coming to you virtually. I just wanted to say first and foremost, I miss all of you a lot. I hope that you are safe, that you're healthy, and that you are doing well in this new, unique situation. In order to continue some normalcy, I thought that it would be best to virtually share with you our Google Slides like we usually do for each lesson. So that's what we're going to be doing today. If you take a look at the top of the page, the announcements look familiar. Those are still the dates for the AP exam. I know that our district is in contact with the College Board, and if there is going to be any changes or any, things with the dates with the AP exams based on what's going on, as soon as they tell me, I will tell you. Continuing on that part of the page, where we usually have our homework, I made a calendar that I'm going to share with you and show you in a few moments. And I think that just because of the way that everything is set up, it will make it easier if you see it in that calendar layout. The objectives over here, this is a new unit. We're going to go over the new unit, talk about Module 69, and what factor markets are. So those are our basic objectives. And finally, we have our question of the day. If you have not done so, please get your question of the day notebook out, and we are going to write down this question like we usually do. What I recommend that you do is pause this video, write down the question. When you're done writing the question down, unpause the video and I'll go through the answer. So at this time, please pause the video so that you can write down the question of the day. And when you're done, press play and I'll go over the answer. Pause now. Okay. Now that you have written down the question of the day, maybe you thought about an answer. So let's look at the question. The monopolistically competitive industry is most similar to blank in the number of firms and blank in their ability to set price. Well, we know that monopolistically competitive firms, there's a lot of them. These are your restaurants, like your pizza places in Denville, the frozen yogurt places, the clothing places in the Rockaway Town Square Mall. So there's a lot of different firms in monopolistically competitive industries. That must mean that they're very similar to perfect competition, which also is very similar. So my eye goes directly down to where it says perfect competition. In terms of the second part of the question, their ability to set price, we know that in monopolistically competitive, in oligopolies and monopolies, they have downward sloping demand curves, and they have that ability to set their price. So that's most like monopoly, which means that the correct answer here is E. Okay, thumbs up if you got that one correct. Good job. In terms of, so this was a Unit 10 question. I am finishing up grading the Unit 10 exams. You will get those grades very soon. In terms of the metacognition for Unit 10, what we're going to do is we're going to probably take Unit 11 virtually. We're probably going to take Unit 12 virtually. And then hopefully we're back in school in a few weeks or so, and we can do the metacognition on 10, 11, and 12. So I didn't forget about it. The folders are still at school, and that is when, we're going to do the metacognition. But of course, you'll know where you stand with grades and everything of that nature. And also, when you get those exams back, if there's anything that you'd like to go over with me, we can do that privately, virtually. Okay? All right. You can put your question of the day notebooks away. And let's go to our module notes. So you should be taking a look at your module 69 notes. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at them. In terms of our schedule, this is what we're going to be doing. Okay, so depending if you're in block 2, you're doing this on March 17th. If you're block 7, you're doing this on March 18th. Today is our first day, Introduction to Factor Markets. So essentially what happens, I'm going to go through this Google Slides presentation, and then these are the things that you have to do for homework or work by the end of the day. So this would be like the first bullet, something that we do in class. you are going to take a picture of or scan, whatever easiest for you, your completed Module 69 notes. So right after you watch this presentation, take a picture of them, and there is an assignment in Google Classroom that says submit Module 69 notes here, upload a picture of those notes, and I will give you credit for it. So that is something that is expected to be done if you're block 2 by the end of the day on the 17th, if you're block 7 by the end of the day on the 18th. For the next class, because remember this is sticking to that A day, B day rotation, you need to be working on modules 70 and 71 guided notes. Be prepared and have those finished so that next class we can go over those notes. Big things that you want to be thinking about. There's only 4 modules. It's really it's not too intense because of the number of modules. However, there are some new terms, but you want to be taking a look at the Quizlet modules for 69 and 73 through 73, and that is going to be due by the end. So for block 2, really, I'm not going to check it for anybody until March 30th. So anything that's down here on this unit assignment, I am checking it at the end on March 30th. So those are like, our overview, usually due on the test day things. And then there's also going to be a Unit 11 graded quiz from the College Board. It's just located in the exact same place that Unit 10 was, so make sure that you complete those, okay? So this is what we're doing today. This is what we are doing in the following days, so if you have some free time, if you want to get ahead, anything like that, this is our schedule for the next 2 weeks, okay? And I will put a picture of this schedule also in Google Classroom. Okay, now to learn. So you should have your Module 69 notes up at this point, and the big things that we're going to be taking a look at today are what are factor markets? We're going to review the factors of production. What do individual firms, regular companies do? How do they use factor markets to identify where their money is going, like which factor they should be buying? And how can the factor market demand curve change? So these are things that we're going to be taking a look at today. The first part is the factors of production. Now, depending on what textbook you look at, depending on the AP exam, sometimes most of the time you hear the word factors. Also, you might hear the word inputs or resources. They're all the same thing. Whenever they refer to those things, they're talking about land, they're talking about labor, they're talking about capital, and they're talking about entrepreneurship. So land, labor, and capital is something that's tangible. Entrepreneurship is something that's a little bit out there. It's not something that we can feel, touch, and manipulate. It's just, we need entrepreneurship to make things go. So the first thing is labor. This is the work that is done by humans. Anything that humans do or think about, that's considered labor. Okay? Land, as you remember from Unit 1, is anything provided by nature. So obviously the land that you put your store on counts as land, but also if you're using coal, that would be considered land. It's a natural resource. If you're using water, that would be considered land. It's a natural resource. Capital refers to things that are man-made. So most of the time we're talking about tools, we're talking about machinery, factories, things like that. When we get into the nitty-gritty, you know that human capital is things like specialized training, like education, things of that nature. So the whole point of this unit is that factors like land, like labor, like capital are actually exchanged in like supply and demand curves, essentially. So this whole unit is all going to be about what does a supply curve and a demand curve for labor look like, and when would they shift, and how do you know how much labor or how much land or how much capital you should have. The big thing that we talk about is factor prices, okay? Factor prices are things that people consider a firm considers specifically when deciding when to buy something. Now, what is an important thing, and they've asked it on every single microeconomics exam since they've started having microeconomics exams, is that you need to understand what the term is for derived demand. Okay, so when you talk about the demand for nurses, the reason why we demand nurses is because of the services that nurses provide, and that's called derived demand. We need medical attention. That's the product that we need. The person that can supply that is nurses. So we need nurses through derived demand. When you're talking about this crazy coronavirus, it impacts people's lungs. So somebody who's like a respiratory therapist, somebody that specializes in the lungs, we have a huge demand for those individuals right now because the derived demand is their specialty on dealing with respiratory issues. Okay. Um, as you can see, the reason why that pie chart is here on the right is because labor is definitely not even close what we spend most of our money on. So regardless of the business, whether you're talking about M&S2, whether you're talking about Apple, whether you're talking about Amazon, labor in the United States overall in general is the biggest expense for businesses. And it makes sense, right? Humans generally are extremely smart, they're specialized, they're gifted. You need labor to make everything go. Capital is important and land is important, but that labor kind of brings it to an extra element. That's why we spend so much money on it. Some keywords that you need to look at. Let's look at the first one, marginal product. If I'm saying the word marginal, hopefully you are saying the word one more. So the idea is when we add one more worker, how much more product does that person give us? So if I'm a pizza owner and I hire one more worker, how many more pizzas will that worker give me? That one worker give me? That's called marginal product. How many pizzas? How many cell phones? How many t-shirts? Whatever you're producing, what does that one more unit of labor give you? You'll always see it as like MP, and then they have this subscript in L that always means labor. If they do it with LA, that means land. And if they do it with C, and sometimes they do it with K, that means capital. One more unit of land, one more unit of capital. We'll talk about those a little bit more next class. The next term that you really need to know is value of marginal product, okay? So essentially, this is the monetary value that one more person gives you. So for example, if I'm a pizzeria owner, I hire one more worker. That one more worker can make me 5 more pies. So right here in this equation, MPL is the 5 pies. The price of the pies, let's say that I sell pizza pies for $10 a piece. So 5 more pies times $10 per pie means the value that that new one worker gives me is $50. Math majors in the room, 5 pizzas times $10 per pizza means the VMPL, or we will see it as another term called MRPL. That is what we are looking for. Now, the big decision, and I compare this exactly to in like Unit 9 and Unit 10 when we do marginal analysis, and I always tell you about that knucklehead that I went to college with. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We keep producing until marginal revenue equals marginal cost. If marginal cost is higher, then we don't produce. It's the same exact idea when we are talking about factor marginal analysis. So when we figure out, okay, this worker is going to cost me $60. That's their wage, $60 a day. But that worker only produces 5 pies at $10. which means they're giving me $50 worth of product. Does it make sense to pay someone $60 when they're only bringing in $50? No, it doesn't. And that's very similar to previous units. That would be like marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue. So what we're going to do is we're going to hire workers where their wage rate is going to equal the value of the value of the marginal product. So I will hire the worker if the VMPL, if let's say, if I get 5 pizzas, $10 a piece, that equals $50. If their wage is only $40, I hire the person because 50 is greater than 40. If their wage is 60, then I'm not going to do it. So 50 is less than 60, I'm not going to hire that worker. And I'm going to keep hiring workers until I get the 50 equals 50. And we're going to do some practice with this so that it makes a lot of sense to you. So this is the profit maximizing hiring decision. It's the exact same as MR equals MC. Just kind of think of that principle and you'll be okay. Okay, so moving on. So here is your total product. So as you add workers, let's take a look at this graph on the left. As you add workers, this is the total amount of wheat that this farm has, okay? And as you can see, it eventually will start getting diminishing returns, negative returns at some point. What we will talk about later, what I'm saying like day 2 and day 3, is why there's diminishing returns. We sort of have already talked about it in class already, but I'll remind you about that. This is what the marginal product of labor looks like. Obviously, when you add the first worker, they gave you 19. When you add the second worker, they gave you, this says like 38. So all I do is 38 minus 19, and I guess that's about 17. So this is all we're doing is finding the difference here and graphing it here. And as you can see, the marginal product of labor curve is always downward sloping. Here's a common way to look at it. You'll take a look at a table. This is the quantity of workers. Every time that you add a worker, oh, I'm sorry, it was 36, not 38. This tells you the difference. So when you add one worker, they give you 19. When you add the second worker, you take 36 minus 19, you get 17. When you add the third worker, your total is 51. 51 minus 36 is 15. So everything in this column is how many bushels of wheat that new worker gave you. That's the marginal product of labor. Now, to take that one step further, what we do is we find out how much the bushel of wheat is, and we find out how much that worker is worth. So for example, if you take a look, and this is directly from your textbook, each bushel of wheat is $20. So if the first worker gives me 19 bushels of wheat, 19 times 20 is 380. So they'll always give you the price. So this is a perfectly competitive market. It's always going to be $20 for every bushel of wheat. And you can see what the value is for each of those workers. And that's what's shown in this column. And this is what we compare wage to when figuring out exactly, should I hire this worker or should I not? So this is what the demand curve would look like, downward sloping, and this is just graphing what the value is for each worker, okay? And if you say, for example, that it costs $200 to hire each worker. Do I hire the first worker? Yes, I do. Do I hire the second worker? Yes, I do. Do I hire the third worker? Yes, I do. Do I hire the fourth worker? Yes, I do. And then here is where I stop at the fifth worker, because anything below here, this is like 190, this is like 150, this is like 120. Those are lower than how much the worker costs. Each worker costs 200. So I am profit maximizing when I do my VMPL equal to the market wage rate. Okay? All right, moving on. So when you take a look at that VMPL, that is the demand curve for labor. There are a couple of things that may make the demand curve for labor change. First of all, if the price of good changes, let's say if you were going back here, that bushels of wheat were no longer $20, but they were like $30. Well, that means that all of these values are going to increase, which means the demand for workers would increase. Um, Conversely, the opposite could happen. Let's say instead of $20 for each bushels of wheat, it was $10. That means that this VMPL is actually going to shift to the left. Okay, so changes in prices of the goods can impact the demand curve, and we'll do that too. Changes in supplies of other factors, if there's something that you usually pair with labor, like if you're talking about bushels of wheat, you're talking about farming. So maybe you have more land to do the farming, maybe you have more machines to do the farming, then that means that the worker can be more productive. If the worker is more productive, that's going to shift the demand curve to the right. Maybe some of the machines or something breaks. If you're working at a pizza restaurant, one of the ovens breaks, your worker can't be as productive. So their marginal product is going to go down, and therefore your VMPL is going to go down. So that's what this second thing is, that usually we pair workers with tools, or we pair them with land and resources, and that's what that means. The third thing is technology. If there is let's say you're a pizza worker and you get a new oven that cooks pizzas a lot faster than the old one, well, now you're more productive, okay? Or in the same breath, let's say that the technology breaks, that can make it go down. So these are things that can make it go up or down. If you're a farm worker, better technology to help you get more wheat. These are all things that could possibly change it, okay? So this is what it looks like. It's obviously in economics. If we are increasing, we're shifting to the right. If we're decreasing, we're shifting to the left. And the VMPL, you may also see it as MRPL. All that means is that's your demand curve for labor. That's what we use. So here's an example. In the table below is the marginal product of labor for a product. The price of the output, which is sold in a perfectly competitive output market, is 50 cents. The price of labor is a constant at $1. So let's say that these are slices of pizza, and you want to figure out how many people should you hire. So your first worker gives you 20 pizzas. Your second worker gives you 16 pizzas. Notice this is in total product. This is marginal product, so that subtraction was already done for you. And what you need to do on the bottom is to complete the table. What is the profit maximizing quantity to be hired? If the price of labor, all right, so let's just look at A and B. Why don't you press pause on this video and maybe just in your notebook, sketch and see if you can complete the table and figure out what is the profit maximizing quantity of labor to be hired. So try to do A and B on your own. Press pause now. Okay, welcome back. So if you did this correctly, your VMP of labor, what we're doing is we're just taking 20 pizzas slices, we're multiplying it by 50 cents each. That means the VMPL for labor is 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, 50. So that is completing the table. The second part is, what is the profit maximizing quantity of labor to be hired? Well, if you look at this and they tell you that the price of labor is $1, do I do the first one? I sure do. $10 is way more than $1. I'm going to hire the first worker. Do I hire the second worker? I sure do. 8 is greater than 1. Do I hire the third worker? Yes. 6 is greater than 1. Do I hire the fourth worker? Yes. 5 is greater than 1. Do I hire the 5th worker? Yes. 4 is greater than 1. Do I hire the 6th worker? Yes. 2 is greater than 1. And do I hire the 2nd worker? Yes. 1 is equal to 1. So the correct answer to letter B, the profit maximizing quantity of labor to be hired, is 7. For letter C, what if the price of labor rises to be $4? Well, then it's going to change. I do the first, I do the second, I do the fourth, I do the third, I do the fourth, I do the fifth, I don't do the sixth. This is where I stop. So for the letter C, if labor is $4 instead of 1, then my profit maximizing quantity would be 5, okay? Then, what does a demand curve look like? This is me doing it on Excel, but essentially, it's always going to be downward sloping. This is the units of labor, and this is the wage rate and the VMPL. It's the dollar amount that we're looking for here. Okay. Taking a look at some multiple choice questions. So usually we do these in partners, but we're social distancing, so we're not going to be doing this in partners right now. In a moment, if you could just press pause and in your notebook, write down the answers. Pause. Okay, welcome back. Which of the following is an example of physical capital? The correct answer here is B, welding equipment. Remember, physical capital is something that's man-made, like a machine, something like that. Which of the following can shift the demand curve to the right? The correct answer for number 2 is E, all of those things. Increase in the price of the good, increase in a factor making it more productive, making the workers more productive, and a technological advance. So all of those things can shift the VMPL. Factor market is called derived demand. Why? It is D. It is derived from the product market. Okay. We need nurses because of the products they provide. We need teachers because of the products they provide. Number 4, what factor of production receives the largest portion of income in the United States? Very popular question. The answer, number 4, is B. It's labor, and it's not close. And then number 5, the individual firm's demand curve for labor is known as the MRPL curve. It can be also called the VMPL curve, so marginal revenue product of labor and value of marginal product of labor. Those are both the same thing. It just means that you took whatever your marginal product was and you multiplied it by the price of the good. Okay, so those are our multiple choice questions. Good job. There is a tackle the test question. Let's take a look at it. And again, you can put this like in your notebook or something. Refer to the table below. Assume that a firm can sell all of the output it produces at a price of $15. What is the marginal revenue product of labor? Draw a graph. What happens when we increase our price? Assume that a technological advance doubles. What would it look like? Okay, so you should press pause and see if you can work this out on your own. Pause now. Okay, welcome back. So when we take a look at the answer here, the easiest thing to do is to make a table. So notice how I have my quantity of labor, the quantity of output, and then what I had to do was I had to find marginal product. All this was subtracting. So we go 300, 550 minus 300, 250, 700 minus 550, 100, you get the point. And we know that we can sell any of these for $15, a price of $15. So all I did here was 300 times 15, 250 times 15, and I got my values there. Okay. So what is the marginal revenue product? So they don't want the value, they just want the quantity. In this situation, it is simply going to be 150. 700 minus 550, that's what they ask you for the first part. Okay, so for the first part, it's 150. The second part says, draw a correctly labeled graph. Taking a look at the demand curve, you're going to be really, psyched about my awesome skills here. Look at that. So there we have our wage rate, MRPL, VMPL, same thing, quantity of labor, downward sloping demand curve. What would happen if the price increased from $15 for the product to $20? Well, it's going to shift to the right. Notice my arrow, notice the new curve. This is the kind of thing that you would be doing. And then it says, let's say that there was a technology advance that doubles the productivity of workers. What would happen in that situation? All I'm doing is taking my marginal product of labor and doubling it. So they really just cared about quantity in this question. So 300 times 2 is 600, 250 times 2 is 500. You get the point, okay? And that's how you would tackle that free response question, all right? Okay, so at this juncture, we went over everything that we need to do for Module 69. I just want to go back quickly to our calendar. So today, after watching this video, if you could please take a photo or scan your Module 69 notes and then add them to the assignment on Google Classroom. I want to give you a grade for that. Also, for next class, please take a look at Module 70 and 71 guided notes. Also, just things to be thinking about, you're going to be doing Quizlet modules 69 to 73. So you can start working on that. And then the Unit 11 graded quiz will also be available, but obviously I would listen to the lessons first. So I wouldn't do the Unit 11 guided quiz until after day 3. So the 23rd if you're block 2, the 24th if you're block 4th. So that's what we're taking a look at now. In terms of my formal office hours, I will be on Hangouts from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Every day. So please feel free to ask me any question. Also, ask me any question at any time because, to be honest with you, I'm just sitting around near my computer and near my phone, as I think most of us are. So if you have any questions, whenever you do this, it doesn't matter if it's in between 7:30 and 3:30. You can, text me on Hangouts at any time. Looking forward to hearing from you. Hoping that you're healthy, hoping that you're happy, and any Netflix or Hulu recommendations, please send them my way too. Okay? I hope you have a great rest of your day, that you're happy and healthy, and I'll talk to you soon.